If Alexander the Great was still alive today, he would be only 29 years old. So let's imagine that Alexander the Great is still alive today. How would the world be different? What kind of impact would he have on the world? Let's find out in this episode of What If. What if Alexander the Great was still alive today? Alexander the Great was born on July 20th, 356 BCE. He was the son of King Philip II of Macedon and his wife Olympias. His father was assassinated when Alexander was just 20 years old, leaving him to inherit the throne of Macedon. However, Alexander was not interested in ruling an obscure kingdom in the north of Greece. His goal was to conquer the entire world. And he did just that. He went on to conquer the Persian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, and parts of India before he died in 323 BCE at the age of just 32. Now let's imagine that Alexander never died. What would the world look like today if he were still around? Alexander the Great was a brilliant military strategist and tactician. He was also a charismatic leader who was able to inspire his troops to great feats of bravery. In fact, it was said that Alexander was almost invincible in battle. He was either personally killed or wounded in over 20 battles, and he won them all. Now, if Alexander were still alive today, he would be a force to be reckoned with. He would have led armies all over the world and would have been successful in every single war. Just think about it. If Alexander had defeated Napoleon in 1815, the course of European history would have been very different. And if he had defeated Hitler in 1945, World War II would have ended much sooner. Not to mention that Alexander would have been a major player in the Cold War. But Alexander was not just a great military leader. He was also a great administrator and lawmaker. In fact, many of the laws that he enacted in his short reign are still in effect today. For example, he was one of the first rulers to introduce religious tolerance. He believed that all religions were equal and that people should be free to worship whoever they wanted to without fear of persecution. This was a radical idea at the time, and it was very controversial. But Alexander stuck to his beliefs, and he made religious tolerance a cornerstone of his empire. Another example of Alexander's enlightened views can be seen in his treatment of women. He was one of the first rulers to grant women the right to own property and to make contracts. He also appointed women to influential positions in his government. Of course, by today's standards, Alexander's views on women were still very conservative. But for his time, he was very progressive. Now, if Alexander had lived a long life and ruled over a vast empire that stretched from Greece to India, his influence on the world would have been immeasurable. His military conquests would have given him control over some of the most important trade routes in the ancient world. This would have made him incredibly wealthy and powerful, and use that power to spread his enlightened views across the globe. It's hard to imagine the kind of impact that he would have had on world history. But Alexander's empire was not just built on military conquest. He was also a great builder and urban planner. In fact, many of the cities that he founded during his lifetime are still inhabited today. For example, he founded the city of Alexandria in Egypt. It quickly became one of the most important cities in the Mediterranean world. It was a center of trade, culture, and learning, and it remained that way for centuries. In fact, the city of Alexandria was one of the largest and most prosperous cities in the world for many years. If Alexander had lived longer and continued to build cities the way he did during his short reign, the world would look very different today. We might have been living in a world where every city is a bustling metropolis. And who knows what other innovations Alexander would have come up with if he had lived longer? But sadly, we will never know what could have been. Alexander the Great died at the age of just 32, possibly from malaria. If he had lived even longer, who knows what he would have accomplished. But as it is, his legacy lives on. He is remembered as one of the greatest military leaders, conquerors and rulers of all time. Do you agree with the points I made in this video? Do you think Alexander the Great would have become the King of England? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.